What if nobody needed money anymore? It begins on a morning that should have been ordinary. You wake up, reach for your phone, and before your mind fully catches up with your body, you notice something strange. No notifications from your bank. No payment reminders. No transactions. At first, it feels like a small glitch, something temporary, something that will fix itself once the system refreshes. But it doesn't. You open your banking app. The numbers are still there. Your balance, your savings, everything looks normal, but it feels irrelevant. You hesitate, not understanding why. Then a message appears. Not from your bank, not from any company, but everywhere, across every screen, across every device. A single statement. Money no longer has value. No explanation. No warning. No details. Just that. First, no one reacts, because the sentence does not make sense. Money has always had value. It defines exchange. It defines work. It defines survival. Without it, nothing works, so people ignore it for a few minutes, maybe an hour, until the first attempt to use it fails. A person walks into a store, picks up something simple, something they would buy every day without thinking, and goes to pay. The card doesn't work. Not declined, not rejected, just ignored. The system does not recognize it as anything meaningful. They try cash. The cashier looks at it, holds it, and then slowly shakes their head. It doesn't matter anymore. There is no price, no transaction, no exchange. The object is still there, but the concept of paying for it is gone. Across the world, the same realization spreads. Money still exists, but it does nothing, cannot be used, cannot be exchanged, cannot represent value anymore. At first, confusion takes over. People try everything. Cards, cash, digital transfers. Nothing works. Not because the systems are broken, but because the system itself has lost meaning. Within hours, panic begins to grow. Not because people are afraid of losing money, but because they do not know how to function without it. Stores stop operating, not intentionally, but because they do not know how to continue. If nothing has a price, what is anything worth? People begin to take things, first carefully, hesitantly, asking permission. Can I take this? The response is uncertain, because the person who owns it does not know if ownership still applies. Does it belong to them or to anyone? Without money, ownership becomes unclear, because ownership was enforced through value, and value is gone. At the same time, something unexpected happens. Some people do not panic. They adapt quickly. They take what they need, not aggressively, but naturally, as if the system that once controlled access has simply been removed. Food is taken, clothes are taken, resources are taken, not stolen, just taken, because there is no longer a rule that says it cannot be. At the same time, others hesitate. They wait. They try to follow the old system, even though it no longer exists. They stand in stores holding items, unsure if they are allowed to leave with them, because permission was once tied to payment. And now, there is no payment. Within a day, the structure of society begins to shift. Work stops, not because people refuse to work, but because the reason to work is gone. Why go to a job if you are not being paid? Why produce something if it cannot be sold? Why provide a service if there is no exchange? The entire system pauses, not violently, but completely. At the same time, something deeper begins to emerge. Value, not financial value, but actual value. What matters? What is necessary? What is worth doing? When money is no longer the reason, people begin to realize that many things they did were not driven by need, but by obligation. Jobs, tasks, routines, all built around earning something that no longer exists. And without that structure, life becomes open, but also uncertain. Some people continue working, Doctors still treat patients, not because they are paid, but because it is needed. Farmers continue to produce food, not because they sell it, but because people need to eat. But not everyone continues. Some stop, because without money, there is no immediate consequence for doing nothing. And that creates imbalance. At the same time, something unexpected begins to grow. Direct exchange, not money, but effort. People begin to help each other, not because they are paid, but because they need something in return. I will fix this if you help me with that. A new system forms. Simple, direct, human, but limited, because not everything can be exchanged easily. Not everything can be balanced, and that creates tension. At the same time, something deeper begins to change. Status. Without money, traditional status disappears. Wealth no longer defines importance. Possession no longer defines power. People are no longer seen based on what they have, but based on what they can do. Skills become valuable. Knowledge becomes valuable. Ability becomes valuable. Because now, that is all that matters. And as the first day comes to an end, as the world begins to move without the system that once defined everything, one realization begins to settle. Money was never just a tool. It was structure. It was order. It was the invisible system that made everything function. And without it, the world does not stop, but it becomes something else, something less controlled, less predictable, more direct, more real, because for the first time, people are not acting for money. They are acting for reasons they must now define themselves. And that may be the most difficult part of all. It does not collapse into chaos the way people expected. That is the first surprise. In the early days, there are moments of tension, confusion, hesitation, but the world does not immediately fall apart. It slows, it shifts, it struggles to find direction, but something continues to move beneath the surface. Adaptation, because even without money, people still need things. Food, shelter, medicine, and those needs do not disappear just because the system that organized them is gone. At first, supply chains break, not because resources vanish, but because coordination was tied to payment. Trucks stop not because drivers cannot drive, but because there is no longer a clear reason to follow schedules, no structure to determine who delivers what, where, and why. Stores empty unevenly. Some places have too much, others have nothing. Not from greed, from disorganization. At the same time, people begin to reorganize locally. Communities form naturally, not through planning, but through proximity. Neighbors who barely spoke before begin to coordinate, sharing resources, dividing tasks, creating small systems that replace the larger one that disappeared. I can cook, I can fix things, I can grow food. And suddenly, value becomes visible in a different way. Not abstract, not numerical, but practical, direct, immediate. The person who can solve a problem becomes important. The person who can provide something essential becomes necessary. And in that shift, something changes. Respect. It is no longer tied to wealth, but to usefulness. At the same time, something else begins to fade. Consumption. Without money, people stop taking more than they need. Not completely, but significantly, because there is no longer a system encouraging accumulation. No reason to buy more, to store more, to compete through possession. Taking too much creates imbalance, and imbalance is now visible immediately, affecting the people around you directly. And that creates pressure, not from rules, but from awareness. At the same time, something deeper begins to change in how people think about time. Work is no longer something separate from life. It becomes part of it. You do what needs to be done when it needs to be done because the result is not payment. It is survival. It is comfort. It is stability. And that changes motivation, not always making it stronger, but making it clearer. At the same time, larger systems begin to attempt recovery. Governments try to reintroduce structure, not through money, but through coordination. They organize distribution, assign roles, create systems of responsibility that do not rely on payment but on necessity. Some of these systems work, others fail, because without a universal measure of value, balancing effort becomes difficult. Why should one person do more than another? Why should someone take on harder tasks? These questions do not have simple answers anymore, and that creates tension, not visible, but constant. At the same time, something unexpected begins to emerge. Choice. Without financial pressure, people begin to choose what they do more freely. Some follow what they are good at. Others follow what they enjoy. Some do nothing at all, at least for a while, testing the limits of a world without obligation. And that creates variation. Some areas thrive, others struggle, because not everyone chooses the same way. At the same time, relationships change again. Without money, many external pressures disappear. There is less comparison, less competition, less focus on status. People begin to connect more directly, based on presence, behavior, contribution. But this also reveals something. Without external structure, internal differences become more visible. Who contributes? Who takes? Who supports? Who avoids? And these patterns begin to define social dynamics more than anything else. Trust becomes local, not global. You trust the people you see, the people you know, the people you interact with directly. Beyond that, everything becomes uncertain. At the same time, something deeper begins to settle. The idea of value itself begins to change. Value is no longer something assigned. It is something experienced. Food is valuable because it satisfies hunger. Shelter is valuable because it provides safety. Skills are valuable because they solve problems. And this direct connection between action and outcome creates something different. Clarity, but also limitation. Because without abstraction, complex systems become harder to maintain. Technology slows, large-scale projects become difficult because they require coordination beyond immediate need. The world becomes more local, more immediate, more grounded, but less expansive. At the same time, something unexpected begins to be missed. Distance, not physical, but conceptual. Money allowed people to interact without direct connection. You could receive something from someone you never met, in a place you would never see, through a system that translated effort into value. Now that distance is gone. Everything becomes personal. And while that creates connection, it also creates limitation, because not everything can be built through direct interaction. As months pass, the world stabilizes in a new form. Not better, not worse, just different. A system where value is visible but harder to scale, where effort is direct but harder to balance, where life is simpler but also more demanding in ways that were once hidden. And in that new world, a final realization begins to settle. Money was never just about buying things. It was about connecting people, across distance, across time, across systems too complex to see directly. By removing money, humanity did not remove value. It revealed it in its simplest form, raw, immediate, unfiltered. And in that clarity, people begin to understand something they never fully saw before. Value was never in the number. It was in the action. And without the number, you can no longer hide from what you actually contribute, because now that is all anyone can see.